Hi, my name is Tony Bebbington. I'm the Director of the Graduate School of Geography at Clark University. And the one thing that I want to talk about in this interview that seems to me has to change for development to become more effective is a question of attitudes and behaviour. And there's a background to how I come to this. One of the backgrounds is the set of one thing interviews that have already been done, which have covered an awful lot of ground already, most of which I agree with. And so it becomes hard to know what to add to that. But one thing that's not been talked about are questions of attitudes and behaviour. And the second part of the background is my own professional development and history. When I was recently graduated, indeed when I was still a doctoral student, I began to read the work of Robert Chambers, a very well-known commentator and advocate on issues of rural development based in the UK, University of Sussex, IDS. And for a long time, Robert had been and continues to argue that for things to improve, questions of behaviour and of attitude and of values are critical and need to change. When I first read his work, it struck me as a bit optimistic, populist, if you will, a little bit romantic, and I still feel very strongly that if development is to change profoundly, then there need to be deep changes in the structures that organise our society and our economy in many of the similar ways that Dick Peat in his One Thing interview was describing. There need to be profound changes in how we produce, or how societies produce, how they distribute, and how societies are governed. But structural change, one of the lessons from Latin America, the region in which I work, is that structural change does not necessarily deliver forms of behavioural change that make the day-to-day processes and experience of development profoundly different from what they were beforehand. And then that leads me to recognise and to want to suggest here that what Robert Chambers has been arguing for a long time remains very valid and very important to bear in mind. I want to talk about a couple of domains in which behavioural change is particularly significant, or might be particularly significant. One of those has to do with issues that Barry Coase talks about in his interview around climate change and environmental change. And evidently, and it's central beyond questions of the regulation of capitalism, behaviour of corporations, behaviour of international organisations, one thing that's central in issues of environmental and climate change is the ways in which people consume, what they value when they consume, and also the ways in which people vote and what they value when they vote. And the implication, I think, is that for the crisis of environmental change to be adequately addressed requires pretty profound changes in attitudes, behaviours and values across a broad swathe of society. Another area in which it strikes me that behavioural and attitudinal change is important relates to the work that we do as development professionals, practitioners, researchers, academics. And that has to do with how we deal with others, other people. It strikes me that in the world of development, many are, and I would include myself here, too quick to judge the positions, the practices, the arguments of others. We tend to judge before we engage. We tend to judge before we try to understand why people are saying what they're saying and why people are doing what they are doing. And that's the case whether it's researchers dealing with each other's work, whether it's activists trying to understand government, or bureaucrats talking about activists and NGOs, or whether it's people in the field engaging with community members and the lay populations with whom they are doing development. And I think that's a whole domain of human interactions in which, again, without behavioural change and without attitudinal change, the effectiveness of development will always be incomplete and always be in question.